Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. I'm Margaret Mims from the Department of Learning and Interpretation here at the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston. And this afternoon, we welcome internationally renowned street fashion photographer Langston Hues to the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston, to discuss his book and ongoing project, Modest Street Fashion, with Houston Chronicle fashion and beauty editor Joy Sewing. A selection of 129 of Langston's photographs from the project, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, 129, are included in the exhibition Icons of Style, A Century of Fashion Photography. They're on a video projection near the end of the exhibition. The exhibition explores a broad and diverse range of views about fashion and fashion photography, elegant portraits made in the early 20th century, the trend-setting fashions of celebrities like Marlene Dietrich, Audrey Hepburn, David Bowie, Salt-N-Pepa, Beyonce, and photographs that have graced the pages of Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, Ebony, and Essence. The images in the exhibition also reflect the broader cultural shifts of the past 100-plus years, because this exhibition really spans more than a century, shifts from aristocratic aspirations to the rough and tumble of street style, from Hollywood stars to supermodels, from the Black is Beautiful movement to the globalism of today. As the exhibition, I think, beautifully demonstrates, fashion photography has often defined the way we see ourselves. And remember, this exhibition is only here through a week from tomorrow. So if you haven't seen it or you need to go see it again, you've got about 9 more days. Which brings us back to the young, stylish, modestly dressed women Langston Hues has photographed and continues to photograph, because they represent a glowing global trend of women who share their distinct style of dress with the world through blogs, through Instagram, and other forms of social media. Now, you'll see all of the photographs by Langston Hues that are in the exhibition during our talk this afternoon, because we're going to project them on the screen right behind them here in Brown Auditorium. I think all of you saw that we had copies of Langston's debut photography book, Modest Street Fashion, for sale outside the auditorium. Now, I'm delighted to welcome Joy Sewing as our moderator this afternoon. Joy is, as I said, the fashion and beauty editor for the Houston Chronicle, covering fashion, beauty, fitness, and other lifestyle topics. She's one of only a handful of full-time fashion editors at major newspapers around the country. An award-winning journalist, Joy has worked for the Kansas City Star and the New York Post, and she's written regularly for Money, People, Vibe, Shape, Time, Town and Country, and other magazines. She's interviewed hundreds of famous faces, from Oscar de la Renta to Houston's own Beyonce, and now Langston Hues. Yeah. She's also a regular TV fashion commentator and often speaks to corporations and groups about workplace dress issues, style trends, and other topics. Just last year, she debuted her first book titled Ava and the Prince, The Adventures of Two Rescue Pups, in celebration of Adopt a Shelter Dog Month. The children's book chronicles the true life story of her own beloved rescue dogs, Ava and Prince. In addition to journalism, Joy has this passion for rescue animals, and I only mention this because you should know that, or you may know that when Hurricane Harvey ravaged Houston in 2017, hundreds of animals were lost or abandoned or homeless, and Joy became the go-to Houston Chronicle reporter for animal rescue and reunion coverage. She also has a passion for helping children, and she's the founder of Year of Joy, a nonprofit organization that provides joyful experiences for children from underserved communities. So, she's also, by the way, she wears many hats, is a former competitive ice skater and became Houston's first professional African-American ice skating coach while she was in college. As she talks with photographer Langston Hues this afternoon, she will explore the many ways his modest street fashion project is breaking down stereotypes, the factors that sparked Langston's passion for this project, his many different careers, because he too is not just a photographer, he has other careers, and what's next on the horizon. As we begin, I want to offer a very deeply appreciative thanks to the family of John C. Wynn, who created the John C. Wynn Memorial Lecture Endowment here at the Museum of Fine Arts. It's thanks to funds generated by that endowment that our program this afternoon was made possible. I know it looks like everything at the museum, the exhibitions and the programs happen by magic. They just appear and they're here and they're wonderful. But it's really the generosity of thousands of people and their support that allows the magic to unfold. So we thank the John Wynn family and we thank all of you who give to the museum. Please take a moment to silence your cell phones. And now let's give Joy Sewing and Langston Hues a very warm welcome to Houston.
Well, I have to say thank you so much. That was a wonderful welcome. And thank you to the Museum of Fine Arts for having us both here. I spent actually, we tried to get in contact several times, but he lives, Langston Hues, H-U-E-S, lives in Indonesia. And so it's a 12-hour difference. And so we played phone tag and then I figured out how to do WhatsApp. And so that's how we had our interview. So welcome. I'm so glad to meet you in person.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for the introduction, Margaret.
Yes.
Appreciate it and all your helps thus far.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not touting my horn, but I want to show, this is a story that ran in the Chronicle last Sunday about Langston. And I'm showing this, one, because I don't usually get a cover story on fashion. Two, I thought this photograph was spectacular. It was just absolutely beautiful. So tell me, you said this was one of your favorites.
Yes, correct.
Tell me why and how you ended up photographing her.
I really like the way that the red pops out.
Mm-hmm.
And this was my first visit to London, England. And I just thought it was dope. Like her fashion and the contrast of like her faith with the hijab here,
Mm-hmm.
the headscarf.
And the Moschino t-shirt.
Yeah, the Moschino, and then the way that she just adorned the lumberjack, what do you say, plaid?
Plaid.
Yeah, so it's just a number of details that I really appreciate about this. And then also the angle. I think if anyone takes a look at my photography, it resembles Scott Schumann, the tutorialist, who was a huge inspiration for my photography, in particular with this project, Modest Street Fashion. So I feel like that incorporates everything I also learned from Scott Schumann, one of my favorite photographers.
Okay, so if you didn't read the article, you're from Detroit.
Yes.
And tell me how you got introduced to the Muslim faith.
I was first introduced to the Muslim faith. I feel like there's some sort of knowledge, especially as a Black American, African American, that you have about Islam, whether it's your friend's name or you hear some students or classmates are fasting during Ramadan. So there's always some sort of, like, I would say, epithets that enters your life as a Black American about Islam.
Sure.
Whether it's Orthodox Islam or the Nation of Islam, you've probably heard something about it. Or even names of iconic figures such as Muhammad Ali, Malcolm X, Farrakhan, not so iconic. So it's always been around since I was a kid, not necessarily in my belief system or within my household, but at least, at the very least, some sort of knowledge of it. And then even in hip-hop, early like 90s hip-hop, late 80s hip-hop, there was a huge Islamic influence in the lyrics and content of hip-hop at that time. And so I can't remember exactly when I started to know about Islam, but my curiosity about Islam personally occurred during high school. And in one of my courses in high school, we had a world religions course, and we learned about most faiths in the world. Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Jainism, Buddhism, Shinto, the list goes on. But when my teacher taught us about Islam, she was very biased and hateful. And so I think it just raised eyebrows for a lot of people. It made me, in particular, curious to know why. And so I actually started to learn more about it myself. And I just continued to learn more and more about it until I found myself at like Barnes and Nobles or Borders, picking up like a Quran. And I remember I grabbed the Quran and I was reading it, And I was like, well, damn, I don't understand what's going on here. Like, where's Jesus? And it was just like a different situation. Like, I would say, like, in like, it's not really like chronology. Like,
Sure.
in the beginning, or I forgot how Genesis go, but like there was Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
So those stories exist in the Quran, and that's what captivated me. I did eventually find Jesus in the Quran, and many of the other Abrahamic prophets, Moses, Noah. So these were things that were really interesting to me because I never saw this in the media. In the media, I would only see like about how dangerous Muslims could be or are, and how there's like this terrorist influence
Sure.
within Muslims.
And this was after
faith.
9/11.
After 9/11, yeah. And so it was just a different perspective. But I remember it required me to go and take another book because the Quran I had was like an old English translation, and I really just didn't know what was going on at all. So I went and got another book called Teach Yourself Islam, and I was learning from that as well. And things just started to fall in place in regards to having a better understanding of the faith.
So, and I made a mistake that a lot of Americans make, and I said Muslim faith, and it's Islamic.
Islam,
faith,
yeah.
And you are a Muslim.
Yeah.
And you became a Muslim at 18 or 19?
18, just a month before my 19th birthday.
So how do you go from becoming a Muslim, then you're out on the streets of Detroit and you just grab a camera and you start shooting people?
Yeah, sort of, not really. So, actually, when I became Muslim, I made a very popular blog titled Seeking Nearness.
Okay.
And so that was pretty popular within creative Muslim community, within and outside of America. So within the Muslim community, especially amongst creatives, people already knew that I had some sort of skills in photography.
Okay.
When this trend of modest fashion was just like beginning around the U.S. and outside of the U.S., there were some bloggers within Michigan that already knew about my photography from Seeking Nearness project, and they reached out to me to photograph with them. And so I began photographing with one in particular who doesn't really blog anymore. At that time, she went by the name of Winnie Detroit. Detroit is Detroit. It's a French colony. So she went by the name Winnie Detroit. And we were photographing and posting on social media. And then next thing I know, people were inviting me to come like to places I never even heard of before, all around the world.
That's fascinating.
You know.
So this opened a whole new career for you. You were going to go to medical school,
Mm-hmm.
and you kind of ditched that idea
Yeah.
and thought you could make a living doing this.
No. No, I just sort of like, so what happened actually, by the time I should go to medical school for traveling overseas, and I should say even before doing this project, before doing modest street fashion, the only places I've been outside of the U.S. is Canada. It neighbors, there's Windsor, the southernmost Canadian city. It neighbors Detroit. And I went to high school in Japan for a student exchange for a year. So I hadn't traveled really a huge extent. But by the time I made this project, and my passion being photography, I already knew that once I go to medical school, it's going to be like 2 years of basic science, 2 years of clinical rotation, 4 years residency, and if you want to make some money, fellowship.
Sure.
So I knew I was already looking at least 8 years. And so it came to my mind that I should create something with my photography because I really enjoy photography, and I wanted to make a book. So I was traveling around the world. I went to over 30 countries, and I photographed in about 19 or something for modest street fashion. By the time I finished that project, traveling, and I got back to the U.S., I was already on the way back to the U.S. thinking like, damn, man, I just saw the whole world. Like, really? For real? Like 8 years of more school? And I was already sort of like checked out of the whole idea. But prior to that, I was working in healthcare for a number of years. And it was okay with my family because no one in my family ever pushed me.
Sure.
No one in my family ever even mentioned the idea of becoming a doctor or going to medical school. Ever. It was actually people outside of my family and friends, family friends that I've become close with. And one of my friends, the father is a physician, the daughter was a registered nurse, and then she became a physician. And Dr. Mukhtar Curtis was the first one to ever mention the idea. And so, yeah, that was the whole process. So when I decided not to do that, no one in my family felt like, I feel like there's definitely some people who did everything they needed to do to go to medical school, undergrad, prerequisites, MCAT, and then maybe they decided it wasn't for them, and the family gave them a load of crap. But in my case, it was very simple. So, no, I didn't go into this. I didn't even go into this as a career, like photography. Even to this day, like I made a great deal of money from photography and different type of photographic projects, but I still haven't looked at it as a career.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. So let me talk about the terminology modest fashion. In the interview, you said that it has many different meanings to different people. What does it mean to you?
For me, modesty, I don't know what it means to me actually, but I think a general ballpark in my mind for modesty is, I think I accept the definition from whoever is considering themselves to execute modesty.
Okay.
Like maybe someone is, I think it comes down to behavior and also clothing.
Sure.
And I feel like within that spectrum, there may be someone who's dressed in a particular manner, and they may say, this is modest. And actually, I don't feel like the one receiving that information has the ability to say if it is or not.
Okay. It's the person wearing them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or I feel like maybe in behavior, there's a better measurement for someone who's observing someone behaving modestly.
Sure.
But I feel like in dress, there's no one who can actually say if that is modest or not modest. I truly believe that modesty only stands within the context of time and place. What's modest on South Beach, Miami, could be very different to what's modest in Taliban, Afghanistan.
Sure.
That's my take on modesty.
One thing that I thought was interesting is that you said you wanted to expand the conversation about modesty, and that it wasn't just about head to toe black, that there are, especially young groups of millennials out there, a lot of them on social media, who are, they're celebrating their faith, but also through the guise of wearing designer fashion. And like this woman here with a red wrap around, and her Moschino t-shirt, and I think you said her jacket, well, we joked that her jacket might be Gucci, and it might very well be Gucci. But just that whole mix of high fashion with the faith, and I think that's very interesting. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I mentioned that I wanted to provide a platform for people, predominantly Muslim, because in the book I also photograph non-Muslims. I also photograph people who are not wearing the headscarf, because again, like I mentioned, modesty comes in all shapes and sizes. For me personally, I feel that style in any genre allows people to express something, whether it's themselves or their ideas or their beliefs. And a project like this really shows the world, especially predominantly Muslim women, right? Shows the world that, wow, it's not a broad stroke on the values and morality and the ideas and the taste amongst this group of Muslims, whereas that's always been the narrative, especially after 9/11. It's always expected, I feel, often in media, that Muslim women are oppressed. Anyone wearing scarves, well, Muslim women are oppressed because of the headscarves. A lot of Muslim women are adorning themselves in all black. But a lot of these things are just cultural things. They're cultural things, maybe even nationalistic, right? So I felt like a project like this really shows that these are human beings. It humanizes people, and I don't feel that any group could be generalized. You know, I mean, there are some ways that we generalize things for the sake of education, right? Most Americans have a bread type of diet. Most Asians have their meals with rice, right? So there are some things that we can generalize, but of course, not one thing fits an entire group of people. So I felt like it was just dope to be able to capture these fashionistas and allow them to express themselves. So actually, the book has a video component with a YouTube channel titled Modest Street Fashion, which I haven't updated in quite some time, but it's there, and I always inquire to them like, what does modesty mean to you individually? And it's always different answers as well.
So, in traveling the world, would you say that there are more stylish pockets than others of Muslims?
Fashion in general. Yeah. And
Like
what happens is,
in Indonesia, are they more stylish than, say, Detroit?
are there cameras? Yo, Indonesia's the most stylish. It's different everywhere, but one thing that's really interesting, like, it doesn't matter about your faith. If you grew up in a place and, I don't know, sometimes born and raised, or if you were just raised in a particular area, you sort of just adapt what's going on there generally as well, right? So I think one of the greatest examples was in Sweden. I was in Stockholm, and the Swedish just have a very minimalistic what do you say? Chromonatic. I forget so much. Huh?
Monochromatic.
Monochromatic, yeah. Style. Sorry, I forget so much English. Very monochromatic style. And it wasn't like within barriers. It was within the Muslim population, who were people who were interested in fashion and being fashionable. And it was also with the general population of non-Muslims. The style was just very similar. It was just that one group also incorporated it with their faith by adorning their headscarf, and the other group just did it like on a, I guess you can say, don't crucify me for this, but like on a secular level. Yeah. So that's interesting. But every place is different, right? I think a lot of times you can, if you're an expert or even not, you can identify like French fashion from Italian fashion, from British fashion, from American fashion. I think the greatest fashion in the world is America.
Ah, nice, right?
America is
Right.
one of the most influential cultures. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, so you live in Indonesia.
Mhm.
You've been there for 5 years.
Yeah.
And it has the largest population of Muslims on the planet,
So they say.
so they say. Why did you want to move there?
I was invited. The first time I ever went to Indonesia, I didn't know anything about Indonesia except for the tsunami and a lot of Muslims. So I also had my own prejudice before going to Indonesia. But when I went there, it was incredible. It was very welcoming. Some of the most friendly people on earth. Amazing food, very spicy. There's Bali. I mean, you can just YouTube Bali, and Bali is like heaven on earth.
Eat, pray, love. That's all you have to say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so in Indonesia, you live in Jakarta.
Yeah.
He not only is a photographer,
Mm.
you're a yoga teacher,
Mm.
you're a rapper,
Yeah.
and he's a sitcom star.
Mm.
So he is the first African American to be on a sitcom in Indonesia.
Yeah.
So we are basically looking at the Indonesian Will Smith. That's good.
Yeah.
So how did you get into all those different things?
Actually, even before I released my book, I did a project in Indonesia in 2014. It's a book that follows like an ambassador of a cosmetic brand there. Her name's Lisa Namori, and she has a community. So the title of the book is Lisa's Movement, but her community is yoga and Pilates. So I was able to be exposed to yoga at that time. I knew about yoga, of course, here in the U.S. and back in Michigan. You can find like every other corner like a yoga studio or something. And I remember one time, even before going to Indonesia, I was thinking about trying yoga, and I went to the studio, but then I just saw the prices, and I was like, hell no, there's no way. And so I never got into it. But then in Indonesia, I was able to get into yoga in 2014. And then actually in 2017, I went over to India for a bit and started practicing there in a city called Mysore, just south of Bangalore.
And the acting?
Acting, I only started acting in Indonesia. So when I finished a contract with a cosmetic brand that it was endorsed for the ambassador Lisa Namori, I was maybe 2 weeks returning to the U.S. and then I got a WhatsApp contact from a network television station there that invited me to a program that had just started. So I entered that program at season 1, and we shot about just under 400 episodes, 3 seasons.
400 episodes?
Yeah, just under 400 episodes,
Oh my gosh, wow.
3 seasons. So it ran for 3 seasons, prime time.
Wow.
Yeah, our biggest night was about 3.2 million viewers.
Amazing. Wow. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's been fun.
And you also have launched the largest hip hop platform
Yeah.
in Indonesia.
All Day Music, so it's the largest hip hop platform in Indonesia. That's been great. Indonesia just saw Billboard enter into Indonesia about almost a year ago now. Also, they've had like musical artists and talents that have even topped American charts all the way up to like the top 15, like Chris Dianti. I think that was in 2012 or 2013. They also have a huge they have some exports now here in the U.S. There's Rich Brian, or originally known as Rich Chiga. He has a song called That Stick. He's also from Indonesia. There's another artist named Agnes Monica. So music in Indonesia is great and doing well so far around the world. And some great acts coming out of Indonesia entering into the U.S. market. And then just recently, Ghazi from Empire Records, he just established Empire Asia. So there's a huge future, I think, going with Indonesian music.
I want to get back to the book and the influence of social media. It seems like there are a lot of young Muslim women who are on Instagram who are really showcasing their style. They have, they're branded with cosmetic companies. They have launched children's wear lines. Do you think social media has kind of helped to fuel the modest fashion movement?
Everything. Music, fashion, travel, anything you name it, social media has played a huge role. Like everything I feel now that anyone wants to dabble into, social media has made it much easier. Even like collaborating, like collaborations amongst artists, brands seeking influencers from this part of the world or that part of the world. Social media has aided that a great deal, yeah.
And where do you see it going? Do you think that this is just a thing, that this is now that, you know, we've seen women models with headscarves on at New York Fashion Week, Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition ran their first model wearing one. Do you think that this is just a trend and that this is going to kind of go away with, you know?
In regards to Muslim women?
Yeah, and the modest movement in mainstream.
I don't think it's a trend
world.
because all these things, regardless of opinion, what speaks is money. And a lot of brands and companies realize the purchasing power in the Muslim community. And so people are trying to cater to that. Like even nations like Japan has now created like a halal fund to attract halal tourism from different parts of the world. So as long as the money there, as long as the money is there, there'll always be some sort of cover on Sports Illustrated or whatever you name it.
I also think that there's an influence of the modest street fashion movement on mainstream fashion. So now you see there's a modest movement just that has nothing to do with religion, that women are wanting more covered up look. They don't want to look like a Kardashian. They want to look like, you know, more modest, more professional in a way. And so I even interviewed a woman here in Houston who has a blog called Modestly Speaking, and she said that she curates looks from like Nordstrom and J. Crew for people who want a modest look, whether it be for religion, and she happens to be Muslim, or for women who just want to be covered up.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting that there's it seems like there's some kind of influence on the mainstream too.
I wouldn't necessarily say it's influence. I think just everything just comes back full circle.
Mhm.
There was a time in America where you wouldn't find women wearing trousers.
That's true. That is true.
And there was a time that people would arguably say America was extremely modest
Mhm.
in dress. So I think it's just things are coming back full circle.
Mhm.
But then again, I think a lot of things are easier to identify in today's society with social media.
Mhm.
Whereas there's groups and you can identify these groups or enthusiasts, right, who are into modest fashion, but maybe like in the mid 90s or early 2000s, you couldn't identify that because we didn't really have the sort of capabilities we do now,
Mhm.
where we can engage with a large group of people and you can go through the hashtag of something like maybe I love modesty, and you can find all these people from
Yeah.
Chicago, New York, and maybe they're not even Muslim, right?
Right.
So I, I don't really think that it's an influence on the mainstream brands as opposed to just things coming back full circle.
So how has your own fashion sensibility changed? Being from Detroit, which is a very fashionable city and has produced many fashion designers out there that are, we know, names that we know, to where you are now. You said you're wearing a batik shirt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I wasn't really thinking about being fashionable today. I was just, the biggest thing that was on my mind before I left the house today was, damn, should I really represent Indonesia today or not?
Well, the fact that he traveled 21 hours
I don't
here
even
and
like
doesn't
these
even look
pants,
jet lagged
but-
is amazing to me.
Yeah.
But I mean, do you think that your style sensibility have changed since Detroit, going from Detroit, now living in Indonesia?
If I'm honest, I think I've always been fresh.
Yeah.
No, actually, I don't know. I just like I said, I put these pants on even though I hate these pants. But it was just easier than digging through like my bag, and I was just like, whatever. At least it matched.
Okay.
So sometimes I dress accordingly. It depends on what I'm doing. Like if I want to shoot something or film something, then maybe I'll be a little bit more fashionable. I think this is pretty fashionable. I like batik. It's one of my go-to designs, but I haven't really been thinking lately like, yo, is this fresh or not? You know?
So,
Sometimes I do, but I'm like more recently I've been concerned with other things.
okay, well, you've been busy.
Yeah.
Traveling the world, where has been your favorite place to visit?
Well, like I mentioned before, I think America is the greatest place. It's just so expensive.
Yeah.
But it's the greatest because nearly every sort of how do you say in English?
I don't know.
Every sort of terrain exists, right?
Okay.
So you have like Alaska if you want like frigid, and you have the Rockies if you want mountainous. You have like Florida and the Keys if you want tropical, and even like some Virgin Islands or something, right? That's like U.S. territory. Even Guam, right? The U.S. has so many territories. So I believe that everything exists in the U.S. So definitely one of my favorite places, hands down, is the U.S. I also enjoy Trinidad and Tobago, and I have a great deal of appreciation for Bali, Indonesia. Yeah, that's probably one of my number one places.
What did you learn about your commitment to the faith through your travels and visiting different communities? Did it strengthen it? Did it, I don't know, did make you question anything? I'm curious.
I realized that a lot of things are just cultural. Like, no matter what religion you are, and the ideas within, in my own opinion, and the ideas within those religions, whether you're like Protestant, and even inside that, there's different ideas like Seventh-day Adventist, Methodist, or if you're Catholic, right? Or if you're Muslim, you have like Sunni, you have Shia, you have Sufi. I feel a lot of things are influenced by culture, and not everyone Islam is going to be the same. Your Moroccan Muslim is going to be different from Malaysian Muslim. Malaysian Muslim is going to be different from Indonesian Muslim. Saudi Muslim is going to be extremely different from every other Muslim, right? And I find the same also with Christianity. Christians in Indonesia are different from Christians in like Egypt or Turkey. American Christians are different from like Irish Christians, right? So I feel like a lot of things are really um, boils down to culture. I feel like no Christians in the world resemble like Palestinian Christians, right? So it's interesting. It's really interesting. I wouldn't say if it's strengthened or weakened. It's just added to my knowledge.
Of the women that you photographed, can you think of the one who was the most fashionable?
The most fashionable. Wow.
I just had to ask. Out of 400 photographs.
The most fashionable. I can't. I can't even think of my number one favorite photograph actually,
I
but
thought this was not.
that's not the number one,
Oh.
but it's one of my favorite for
Okay,
sure.
all right.
Yeah, certainly one of my favorite.
Okay.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's tough.
Okay.
That's really tough.
Your mother and your brother both converted.
Yeah, they both become Muslim.
Mm. Your brother 6 months after you.
Yes.
Your mother 5 years after you.
Oh no, 1 year after me and my brother.
1 year.
Yeah.
Why did they join you in the faith?
I think they believe that I make good decisions in life. And then they also learned about it, and I think I was a good example for, I guess I was a good example for as a Muslim for them. And they thought like, whoa, this is dope. Okay, I want to take Shahada too.
So-
Shahada, by the way, is what you say to become Muslim. Yeah.
So you tell your mom, I'm going to be a street photographer, and I'm just going to travel the country and the world and take pictures of Muslim women in communities.
No, I never said that.
Oh, okay.
Never.
All right.
No, I don't think there's ever been a time I told someone I'm a street photographer. No, I told my family about the book I want to make, and I wanted to travel, but that's not new for them. Like, actually, one of my biggest dreams was being an expat. Like,
You said this.
yeah.
Tell me, let's talk about that. Why?
I just always thought it was amazing. Like, even in my family growing up, like, I have, like, Korean relatives, Filipino relatives. My grandmother's, like, Irish and Black American. We have, like, Hispanic. So it's just, I just always grew up around, like, people that didn't necessarily look like me, although it's, like, my family and my blood. So it was always something interesting for me, like, cultures, right? And I just always had this desire to, like, live overseas. And I used to check out these blogs back in middle school. So I used to play like Yu-Gi-Oh and Pokemon with my friends. But quite often when like everyone was trading cards, I'd be like on the computer like looking at a new blog of some expat living overseas. And that's how I got into photography as well. So I would check out the blogs and they were taking photographs. And I was like, okay, damn, I got to learn photography. I want to go live overseas. And so it was always just something that fueled my imagination and desire to learn like languages and about different cultures.
You said that the man behind the sartorialist was one of your inspirations.
For modest street fashion.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I remember talking with someone here at the MFA, and they compared your work to Bill Cunningham in a way. And, the late Bill Cunningham, who was a street photographer in New York for the New York Times, and he captured all the like you see the women at New York Fashion Week are out.
Yeah.
How does it feel to be in that kind of space and doing something very unique that hadn't been done before?
It's an honor.
Yeah.
I mean,
And you're only 31 years old.
yeah. Hey, come on. I'm actually 22.
Are you?
No, I'm kidding. No, I don't care about age. It's an honor actually. But I don't really think about it too much because like outside of Scott Schumann, maybe like Annie Leibovitz, I never like was really into like different photographers, right? Or maybe there was photographs I liked. I'd probably just remember the name of the photographer on that day, but probably never forget the photograph, right? But it's an honor for sure, most certainly. Yeah, I don't know how to feel about that. Yeah, because I was never really into like photographers. I was more into like just people who were doing things that I always wanted to envision myself doing as well. So I may have never like captured names or something, but if there was like some photos that I enjoyed or I liked, I probably never forget that photograph.
What makes a great photograph?
Ooh, that's tough. For me personally, I believe angles. I believe also the sort of environment, the ambiance can tell a story about the photograph. I also enjoy to play with light. Um, Not so much in these photographs, but definitely like light, contrast of light and dark. But there's so many things that can make a good photograph. But I think the basics just requires composition, maybe depth of field. Subject is extremely important. Subject is extremely important.
Will you ever move back to the U.S.?
Mm. Yeah, I think about that all the time actually. Yeah, I do. But I don't know when.
Okay.
I got like some new projects going on right now in Indonesia.
Okay, so talk about those. What do you have
Okay.
going on?
So we still have the hip hop project. It's the largest hip hop platform in Indonesia. All day music. I just created a new project titled Yoga Nisha.
Yoga what?
Yoga Nisha.
Yoganesha.
So like yoga in Indonesia.
Indonesia, got it.
So actually it's very interesting because people in Indonesia, they'll ask me like, what is yoga? Langston, apa itu yoga? Like, what is yoga? And it just baffles me because yoga has been in Indonesia far longer than it's been in America. Even like there was a time that there was like this huge dynasty known as Majapahit dynasty in Indonesia. And this dynasty was like a... So I'm going to say this, but I don't want you to think that yoga is Hindu. But this dynasty was a Hindu dynasty. And always what comes along with Hinduism is yoga. But yoga exists before Hinduism. So yoga has no religious affiliation, actually. But so yoga's been in Indonesia since maybe like well past the 16th century. But even today now, like most people don't really know about yoga in Indonesia. But it's growing. Like even if you look at Google Trends and a number of other analytics, you can see that it's really growing there. So
before we leave, you're going to take us through like a yoga pose or something like that.
no, I won't be doing that today. Like
And then he's going to rap. No, just
I'm out of shape right now. Yeah.
Okay, Langston Hues, the name, Hues. Tell us about that.
So hues is colors, right? And there's a friend of mine, he's a poet named Baraka Blue, and he used to always call me, what do you say? He just always say like ML Hughes, right? And he knows that I have a historical connection with late great Langston Hues, Hughes. And so I adopted that from my friend Baraka Blue. Yeah. So Hughes just means colors. Him and a few other creatives were calling me Hughes because of like hue saturation with photography. Yeah.
Now, is your biological name Langston?
My family name is Langston. Yeah. Yeah. So my first name is Muhammad. Yeah. But that was after I became Muslim.
That's right.
Like 12 years ago.
Are you going to tell us your name before 12 years ago?
My middle name is Sheldon.
Oh, Sheldon. Okay.
My middle name is Sheldon. My first name before Muhammad was Raymond.
Raymond.
Yeah. And my father is Ray.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you did talk about a kind of distant relationship, biological relation
Yeah.
to Langston Hues.
So Langston Hughes is James Mercer Langston, his first name. James Mercer Langston. His family name, his father name, last name is Hughes. From his maternal lineage, there's a John Mercer Langston. And John Mercer Langston was a lawyer and theologian who's an uncle of Langston Hughes. And we share a common lineage through John Mercer Langston. Yeah. According to my family. So. But I didn't make that up. That's according to my family. I've never seen like documents, You ever met someone like, especially if you go overseas, like maybe the Arab world or Africa or like India, Pakistan, or even like Indonesia, they'll have like a chart in their house that goes back to their grandfather in like, I don't know, 7th century, 8th century, right? It's unheard of in the U.S., but yeah, I don't have one of those. Yeah.
What else can you share about this whole concept of modest fashion and where you see it going?
Mm. Well, it's been growing,
Yeah.
and it's in another place that like beyond me now. Like even recently, my friend was able to take a deal with Nike for a pro sport hijab, which was probably unthought of like in early 2000s, especially after 9/11. But she's a gold medalist in fencing. Her name is Mohammed Ibtihaj Mohammed. She plays for the national team, American national fencing team, and I don't think that was something that anyone could imagine like after 9/11. So it's going many places. Even you see Dolce and Gabbana, you see all these brands attempting to wedge their way into the
In that market.
into the market, which is a huge market, very huge market.
Okay. I guess we can open it for questions. Are we at
Yeah,
that
sure.
Are we at that point? Okay. All right. I know I find him fascinating, and I'm sure you all did, so I know there are questions out there. So I saw one hand.
Hi. So a couple of questions. One is, what kind of cameras do you use? And then the other one is, I'm a photographer, and I also love to just photograph people on the street. So what I do is I just pop up there and I say, hey, can I take your photo? And they, I kind of work. I always say I'm an artist. Can I take your photo? So are these like planned out, or are these people that just were walking by and you said, hey, I like their outfit, or how? What's the story?
Okay, I'd like to ask you a question afterwards as well. So her first question is what kind of camera I use, and the second one is how do I approach the subjects to request to photograph them. For the first question, for this project specifically, I've used a Canon 5D Mark I, and then somewhere during the project, I switched over to a Canon 5D Mark II. Most of the photographs I shoot with 50mm lens, prime lens, because I really like to just focus on my depth of field, the aperture range. I think there might be a few shots that I shot with a 35mm, and there's definitely a few more shots that I shot with 85mm. But for the most part, most shots were done with a 50mm lens. In regards to approaching people, it's kind of different everywhere. Like, so this is in Dubai. This is a good friend of mine. She's also from Detroit, named Melanie L Turk. She's the founder of Haut Hijab. In her case, I stayed at their home with her and her husband when I went to Dubai, so it was inevitable that we were going to photograph. And I photographed with her also in Italy, also in Indonesia, Malaysia, and then also in I don't think we've ever photographed in Detroit, but also in Dubai. So it's different in every place, right? I don't think for this project, there's been very few times that I've approached people and inquired to them to come photograph with me. But one thing I did for this project in the beginning is after I had like invitations to come to like unknown lands that I never heard of before, I made up social media posts like, hey, I'll be in Colombo, Sri Lanka, or I'll be in Oporto, Spain, or Portugal, sorry. London, England, or whatever it may be. I put the post on social media. Some people replied and contacted me via email, and then I organized everything accordingly. There were a few places like in Kuwait. I didn't really do any call-outs because when I went there, I stayed with Asia and her husband Ahmed. Asia, if you don't know, she's a huge influencer now on social media. And so there, they just knew like all the other influencers, and then especially the cases in social media and in a particular genre, when you start to collaborate with a few of the influencers in that genre, there's definitely other influencers that want to join your project, and then also their fans. And I didn't limit this project to only influencers. I made sure to photograph the fans of the genre or fans of the influencers as well. So there were very few places where I actually approached people and I said, yo, come take this photograph with me. Yeah.
Did anyone say no?
No. But I want to ask you, or have you ever been rejected?
No, actually, I haven't. Now that I think about it, and I've made some great friends. I met a survivor of the bomb in Pearl Harbor, and I mean, I've met all kinds of interesting people. Yeah, and I went back and actually stayed with them.
Wow.
In Berkeley. Yeah, so there's been some great stories.
Yeah.
But I have not. I think it's just because I'm kind of Joy knows me. I'm really friendly.
She is very friendly.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, I've never been rejected. Yeah.
Anyone else? Question? Over here.
All right. So, when you became interested in Islamic faith, I grew up Baptist, and I'm kind of gaining a bit of an interest in the Islamic faith too. When you decided to convert, were you converting from Christianity to the Islamic faith? Because I know a lot of black people grew up Christian. Or did you come upon a new religion and decided to?
So his question is, at the time that I actually became Muslim, did I come from like Christianity or some other religion? I was born and raised in a Christian household. In my household, we had Baptists and Methodists. And then around 8 years old, somehow I became Catholic because I have a lot of Filipino relatives, and I never went to church with the exception of like Easter or Christmas with like my Protestant family members. But quite often on Sundays I go to church, and then also catechism. And I went to catechism for a few years. And then I think around like 8 years old, I became Catholic. And then 10 years after that, I became Muslim. So from Catholicism. Yeah.
Wait.
I had a question for you. Obviously, as you travel to different countries in the world, different countries have different levels of like development they're at. Has how affluent or wealthy a country ever like constrained or opened up like the people you see on the street? Like these women have like the time and the money to think more about fashion and how they dress, versus in some other countries they may not have that kind of purchasing power. Like, has that ever played a role in how many subjects you have in those countries?
So the question is that some countries are more developed and more affluent than others. So has that influenced the amount of subjects I've been able to photograph, because maybe some countries have more wealth or more people who are interested that have wealth? Not to my knowledge, but actually it doesn't matter which country you're talking about. Like if we say they're a poor country, there's definitely a lot of people there who have a lot of money, for sure. And like I think Indonesia has one of the greatest disparities when it comes to haves and have-nots. But there are people in Indonesia who are extremely wealthy, like many multi-billionaires, and it has like the highest, the fastest growing rate of high net worth individuals, over about 250,000 high net worth individuals in Indonesia. And one thing I also find is that most countries, people have the opportunity to live, even if it's like a under. We don't use the term third world country anymore, actually, but I find that even if you find a country that is considered underdeveloped, there's still people who are living there, like they're on Melrose or Beverly Hills, at ease, no problem. And they probably have a few homes in Newport or Manhattan as well. And one thing I also found is that a lot of the developing nations, a lot of the wealthy families and the kids, they've had education like in Europe, maybe Oxford, or even like Harvard in the US, right? So it's interesting, especially in regards to wealth. But in regards to fashion and wealth, I haven't been able to observe anything like that yet.
I see a question, hand right there.
It's sort of an observation. Looking at these women who have such a wonderful fashion sensibility, looking at their body language and their pose and how, and I'm wondering whether, not necessarily this one, but many of them, there's this, well, I don't know whether it's directed or whether it comes naturally or whether it's fostered by what they see on Instagram and in fashion magazines and things. There's a certain body language and pose that looks like they are fashion models as well as wearing fashionable clothes. And I'm wondering sort of whether that's some, how much direction there was in the photography, how much is the natural.
So the question is, has there been any like directing or influence of some of these models who are posing, because they seem to be natural? Some of them appear to be like models already.
They have Insta swag.
Insta swag, hey. Actually, a lot of these subjects are already well deep into the genre of like modest fashion. So some of them are already taking like endorsement from different deals. They've been doing it like OOTD. I don't know if people still use that term, outfit of the day. Some people have been doing outfit of the day for quite some time already. By the time I got to photograph with them, so they've already had some skills and experience. I don't normally give so much direction unless it's required, or there's just something I see which I think is cool. But for this project, I haven't given so much direction. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Right there.
I wonder, and you may not be able to speak to this, but I'm just wondering what you think about. There's a little bit of controversy that I've seen in the hijabi fashion. I guess now it's more like Instagram world, right? Not so much blogs, but where some of these ladies have been getting a lot of flack for how they dress modestly. So whether they show a little bit of hair, or whether they, in Asia's case, tattoos. And I know that Asia's struggled a lot with, having to respond to a lot of the flack and crap that she's gotten from people. So I was just wondering what you think about that kind of uprising tension.
So her question is, what do I think, or have I witnessed the criticism that some Muslim women receive because they're wearing what some people deem as not modest from the Muslim community, right? Because there's a broad spectrum of ideology within Islam, and then there's also many different schools of thoughts within Islam. So it's going to be very difficult to meet two Muslims that have the same ideas in faith, actually, despite what media says. It'd be difficult to meet two Muslims that can agree when they should start fasting during Ramadan, which is like a whole science in itself. Yeah, I've witnessed that. I've seen that a lot, actually. People say, oh, this isn't Islam, or this isn't Muslim, or you're not modest, or they talk about the tattoos as well. So, yeah, it's true. Yeah, like I mentioned, in Islam, there's different sects. There's different schools of thoughts known as madhab. One school may say that you can't have tattoos. Another school says, what are you talking about? Tattoos are okay. So, yeah, you definitely see that for sure, especially on social media. Even before, like, I had someone say something to me like, oh, brother, this is haram, or what's in English? Not permissible, forbidden for you to photograph these Muslim women. And I was like, dude, like, if I was like some white Christian dude, you guys be praising this. Oh, this is amazing. Look at the exposure the Muslims are getting. But since you can speak to me in that sort of medium, because I am Muslim, then they decided to voice their opinion.
I have a question just on this as you talk. Is the criticism coming from other, like, millennial Muslims, or is it coming from older?
It's a mix. Sometimes it's from millennial Muslims. Sometimes it's from older Muslims. Yeah.
There was a hand up here, I see. Yes, ma'am.
How many books have you read by Langston Hues?
How many books have I read? I don't know how many books, but I've read quite a number of poems since I was a kid by Langston Hues, yeah. A Dream Deferred being my favorite.
Not Without Laughter is the book of his biography, in a way.
The biography.
Not Without Laughter.
Not Without Laughter. I'm going to check that out.
Any other
Have you read that?
Not that I can recall. Yeah.
He's my favorite author from a little girl.
Oh, yeah?
I've read his books several times each.
Okay.
So I was happy to hear that you're...
He has a connection.
Yeah.
I have a question over here.
Not Without Laughter.
Do you think that, when it comes to like modest fashion, is it just like applied to like hijabis and turbanistas, or do you think that there's another realm of modest fashion that does not encompass the hijab?
Oh yeah, there's a huge realm that doesn't encompass the hijab, and I think that realm has even been going um, way before the genre of modest street fashion. Modest street fashion meaning incorporating the hijab, but also not. In my sense of this book, modest street fashion is not incorporating the hijab. So if you go through the book, you'll see that I also included in women who don't wear the headscarf and consider themselves modest. So in Toronto, in Morocco, and Netherlands, I think Chicago. There's quite a number of photographs I also have there where they are not wearing the hijab, because modesty is not just sort of, what do you say in English? Kalau itu bukan cuma di pakai jilbab.
I don't know what he's saying.
It's not just like what do you know? You know, like it's not just reserved for the headscarf.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, yeah.
So the language you're speaking is
Indonesian.
Indonesian.
Yeah,
And you're fluent.
I don't know what language I can speak anymore.
Other question, yes.
I wanted to ask, like, okay, there's the hijabi modest street movement. So, like, in India, you know, there's Muslims who wear sari and there's stomach shows. And, you know, there's, I guess in Africa, they wear, like, those dresses, Muslims, and their leg shows. Do you think it's kind of becoming more uniform as to what is modest? Because, you know, because now I see people who wear saris with their blouses very long. And, you know, so it's...
Do I believe that it's becoming uniform, the idea of modesty? No. I don't think it's becoming uniform. I don't think it will ever be uniform. It's...
Because I've seen personally cultural attire change to be a little more covered than it used to be, and that's like from Muslim countries. Because, you know, it's definitely very varied, but, you know.
I do believe at the very least, or at the most, if you're talking about uniformity, it would only occur regionally. But it would never be, in my opinion, something that is uniform throughout the world. And there's even some places have laws where they do direct what is modesty, right? So like there's a place in Aceh. So although Indonesia's the most populated Muslim country in the world, it's not a Muslim country. There's only one region in Indonesia that goes by something called Sharia, which would make, if all of Indonesia was ruled by Sharia, that would make it a Muslim country. Like Malaysia is a Muslim country, ruled by Sharia. But if you know anything about Sharia, Sharia is only applicable for Muslims. So if you're not Muslim, you can never be ruled by Sharia. So although Malaysia is a Muslim country, any Muslim country, I don't know, it's kind of strange. Like Saudi is its own world. Saudi Arabia is like its own little thing. Like it's not really a good standard for Muslims. But a place like Malaysia, oh wait, don't quote me on that. A place like Malaysia, where it's a Muslim country, there's a pretty sizable population of non-Muslims, even though the country is ruled by Sharia. But again, like I mentioned, Sharia is only something that governs the Muslims. But there are some places in the world where there's Sharia, and it dictates on what you can wear. So in Aceh, as a man, I can't wear shorts. Aceh is the place that was hit by the tsunami in 2004 in Indonesia, right, Indian Ocean. So, and in places like Aceh, I can't wear shorts. And then women have a particular dress code, again, according to the school of thought that was chosen to rule the Sharia in that area.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Would there ever be a street fashion, Muslim street fashion for men?
So modest street fashion is something that's not just for women. I mean, not just for Muslims, right? So for me to make some project, you mean for me, right?
Yeah.
To make a project that is modest street fashion
of Muslim men.
of Muslim men, I don't see that in the future.
Okay.
But I do feel like
Because they're not fashionable?
I just I just feel that generally in the world, when we talk about modesty, unfortunately, we don't ever reserve that idea for men.
And, okay.
We love to dictate
To
and
women.
compliment on what women are wearing or should be wearing or shouldn't be wearing.
Well, I think that's a
Not me, but the world
that's
by
for
large.
another panel, because that sounds like a really deep conversation that we need to have, right?
Yeah, I would never dare try to tell a woman what she should or shouldn't be wearing.
Any other questions? I have 2 more. Okay, so
Are there any good women hip hop artists in Indonesia, and has mumble rap taken over in Indonesia?
Yes, mumble rap has already taken over Indonesia. And there are some
and explain what mumbo.
mumble rap. So I think there's 2 opinions on what mumble rap is. Mumble rap is the type of rap, when you hear it, you can't understand it. But I think most listeners who are not hip hop fans, it's difficult to understand most raps anyway. But mumble rap, it's where even like a lot of hip hop fans can't understand what they're saying. It's like, damn, what is he saying?
Can you do some or no?
Mumble rap usually has a cadence of triplets, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. So if it's mumble, I'm walking in the back and I'm pulling it down, billing it, getting it, rolling it, hey, hey. And mumble rap has taken over in Indonesia, and I feel that like languages like Indonesian, which is strong syllables, like maybe if we speak Indonesian, we should say something like kamu. That's 2 syllables. Mau kemana? That's like kamu mau kemana, kemana. So I feel like tuaga, 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 tu. This sort of type of linguistics, it's easier to do mumble rap in triplets. And we find that when the rise of mumble rap occurred, there was a spike in the number of more famous Asian rappers. I feel like a lot of the Asian languages have this sort of like, I don't even know what you call it in linguistics, but it's like
Cadence or
cadence for the music, but for the language, right? So maybe like Filipino, Malaysian, Indonesian, Thai, Japanese, doko ni ikimasu ka? Like, where do you want to go? Like, doko ni ikimasu ka? Right? So they have these 2-letter syllables. That is definitely, mumble rap and triplets have made it much easier for these linguistic groups to enter rap.
I learned something new. I didn't know that. That's good.
Yeah.
I saw another question over here. Yes.
When was the first time you noticed, like, whoa, like a lot of people love what I'm doing?
Ooh.
Yeah, that's a good question. Good question.
So he said, when was the first time I noticed a lot of people love what I'm doing? It wasn't necessarily like a lot of people love what I'm doing. It was definitely at a time that people I really had a great deal of respect for, and also inspired me, that I would say sort of like, damn, how do you say, like, sort of gave me like the green light, or sort of like supported like what I was pursuing to do. It was definitely like at that time, not really like more so about how many people were interested in what I was doing. It was just sort of the right people, I felt like. People that I believe their opinion mattered for me personally. Yeah.
So I want to remind everybody that the Icons of Style exhibit is here and continues through the next week?
Sunday,
Through-
September 26th.
Yes, and Langston Hues' work is featured in one of the films in the exhibit. And so how does it feel to be a part of the Museum of Fine Arts Houston?
Yo, this is really fresh because actually this project has usually been incorporated in like things that have a lot to do with like modest fashion or Muslim fashion. So to be a part of like Icons of Style, a century of history of fashion photography, I really appreciate it because it's like everything I enjoy, right? Like there's photography there, there's street style, there's like some like hip hop icons like Cardi B, some people's icons, Cardi B, like Beyonce, Run DMC.
Yeah.
So for me, Salt and Pepper,
Yeah.
like that's fresh.
Yeah.
in my opinion. Yeah, I'm really grateful to be a part of this project. You know.
Well, it's been a pleasure
Thank
to
you.
sit and talk with you again. So thank you so much.
Yeah. I don't want you guys to forget there's some books out here in the front. You guys can grab that as well because actually she already has one. Anyone who wants to photograph, it doesn't matter whether you think you're modest or not. Let's photograph if you want to photograph. But if you haven't got a book, please feel free to get one already. And I think we're going to have like a signing session for that as well.
The books are right where they were, right outside the auditorium, so pick your book up there and then head right above us to the main level, to the lobby of this building. That's where Langston will be and Joy will be, and we'll have a little reception. He'll sign books. But thank you again to Joy Sewing and to Langston Hues for a lively conversation.